the short run, here's what I think is going to happen. Of course, we have these moratoriums, but they can't last forever. And I've been hearing more and more that they're not being enforced. It was recently announced in Seattle, I'm in Washington, the state of Washington, that they were going to allow evictions to go forward. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it's been estimated that millions and millions of people are at risk of being evicted once the moratoriums are lifted. And I don't know where those people are going to live. As far as I can tell, most of the homeless shelters are full. I guess ultimately maybe the government will set up tent cities in the deserts or wherever they can. But the evictions are coming. It's been very unfair to landlords to keep from evicting people. The poor landlords, they still have to pay their mortgage, their insurance, their property taxes. And if somebody doesn't want to pay them rent, they haven't been able to collect it because of the moratoriums. And the government has instituted a few programs to provide financial aid to landlords, which I think have been some help, but the problem is way too big. Now, I also think one of my bachelor's degrees is in economics, which is a long time ago, but I know a little bit about it, and I believe there's going to be a stock market collapse. Some people, like Harry Dent, believe it's going to happen as early as this month, in April. I don't predict the future in any specific time, but I'm sure you probably have already heard something about this, or if you do a Google search for collapse or financial collapse or something like that, you will see that most of the experts say we're in the biggest stock market bubble in history. I just heard today on the news the market is again at record highs, and usually the higher it goes, the bigger the collapse. I think Harry Dent is predicting something like an 80% decline in the stock market. And by the way, looking back at the crash of 1929, which people like to compare this to, the stock market, of course, had a crash and there was the Wall Street panic. And contrary to what many people know, it took well over 25 years for the stock market to get back to where it was before the crash. It actually was something more like 40 years. So when this crash happens, the stock market is not going to recover probably for a very long time. We are also in an absolutely insane real estate market bubble. Prices are going up and up and up and have been for some time. It's very common to get multiple offers as soon as a property is listed, 5 or 10 offers. And then oftentimes the prospective buyers will start bidding against each other and bid the price up even more. And this is going to be the biggest real estate bubble in history. Again, I don't know when it's going to happen. What I do know is history teaches that stock market crashes and real estate crashes, when they start to happen, they happen pretty quickly. Usually in a matter of weeks, not months or years. So when it does come, it's probably going to come pretty quick. So that's what I think is coming very soon, and it will take decades to recover. The good news is this. Your children and grandchildren will hopefully learn lessons from this. They usually do. I have a very high opinion of the younger generation. I think the millennials are great. They're already way smarter than me and their parents and their grandparents. and they will create something that's better. And when they do, it's going to be horrible in the short run. Millions of people are going to go broke. Millions of people are going to die. But humans will go on, except for one possible problem, which I'll mention in a minute. And your kids and grandkids will create a much better world. However, there's one problem with that. And that's the environmental problems we're having. If those environmental problems that most of the experts are predicting come true, then probably the human species will disappear. I don't think that's going to happen for a very long time, but it could happen. If you look back in history, billions of years, many species have come and gone. And maybe the human species is going to go extinct one of these days. Some experts say it's already too late. Again, I don't predict the timing, other than to say I think it's a long ways away before there's an extinction event. But some experts say it's already too late to reverse the environmental problems, as you probably know. So the good news is, if the human species survives, ultimately things will be much better. It's interesting to me that there's a strong leaning in the United States today towards socialism. I think Bernie Sanders calls it democratic socialism. Maybe Elizabeth Warren says the same thing. And it looks like Joe Biden is leaning in that direction. He would never call himself a democratic socialist, but he sure does believe in bigger government and government helping the people. So it seems to be the way it's going, and I wouldn't be surprised if your children and grandchildren create something along those lines. Ed Vallejo of Americans Against Foreclosure has very advanced degrees in international affairs and is an expert on this. And he points out that many other countries in Europe are already basically socialistic or have socialism as a system. And I think he's probably right, and he could probably tell you a lot about that, and he favors that system. So maybe that's where we'll go. Unfortunately, it has a bad name. Many societies that claim to be socialistic or based on socialism end up with horrible dictators, like Russia and a few South American countries. So socialism has a very bad name. And it's not perfect, nothing is, but it seems to be the direction that we're going in. So I wouldn't be surprised if your children and grandchildren create something like that. Now, before I end this, I think I'm getting close to the time. I want to point a few other things out. There is an enormous financial unfairness going on. As you've probably heard, the top 1%, and it's really a fraction of 1%, own and receive the vast majority of income in the United States. There happens to be an excellent video I would highly recommend about how this happened, called Requiem for the American Dream by, I'm blocking on the name right now, but if you Google Requiem for the American Dream, it's done by a very famous philosopher, Noam Chomsky, N-O-A-M, I think it's C-H-O-M-S-K-Y. It's less than an hour, I think, and it explains how we got here. And Noam says He remembers the Depression because he's old enough. And ever since, he has noticed that there's a sense of optimism in the United States. And he mentions that he doesn't see that anymore. And if you watch his video, it's short and a very excellent explanation as to how we evolved and got into this situation. So thank you again. I'm going to end this there, and we'll move on to the next video.